Welcome to the Epic Company Culture Podcast, where your host, Josh Sweeney, will give you, the business leaders, HR professionals, and company culture aficionados, the knowledge you need to take your company culture to the next level.
Hi, my name is Josh Sweeney with the Epic Company Culture Podcast. Before we get started, I'd like to thank Prototype Prime for this amazing podcasting space. For those of you in Atlanta, I definitely recommend you check out Prototype Prime and their technology co-working space. They've been amazing to work with, and we really appreciate you. So thank you. For today, we are going to talk about the hiring process at Spi Dynamics. Now, the reason I want to share this is in the first episode, I highlighted that Spi Dynamics was it was the most amazing company culture and one of the best companies I had worked for. Culture-wise, hands down, number one. Now, I attribute the company culture that they had to the hiring process that they utilized and that I got to experience. So I'm going to share a lot about that story, how it worked for them. And my goal is to give you takeaways and experience shares that you can use in your organization. So to get started, I applied to Spi Dynamics, which is a web application security software company. And when I applied, I got a very quick and immediate response. And they went through my resume, did all the normal onboarding pieces, I would say, just to engage me as a potential employee. And the first thing that happened was they gave me a call. Their HR team gave me a call and did most of the background check, right? So let's get authorization for the background check. Let's go through the resume. So HR was vetting me from the beginning. Is everything accurate on my resume? From there, they rolled into a process of me doing a phone interview and speaking with my manager. I think it was a phone interview. It might have even been an in-person pretty quickly with that organization. It's been some number of years. But my takeaway was that I not only spoke to the person that I would be working for and did a light interview, but the first part of their vetting process was an exercise. It was basically a test where they said, okay, you're going to be in this position. In that organization, I ended up being a lead QA engineer. At the time, I was hiring for a software QA position. And so they gave me the software and they said, here's a license. We want you to go find whatever bugs you can find in the software and give us a nice little write-up of it and come back to us and let's see how you do. Okay. Now, this was a position that I had not held at another company. Before that, I was in the Security Operations Center at Internet Security Systems doing managed security devices. So more on the hardware side than the software side. And so I went back and started digging into the software and finding every way that I could test it, break it, bend it, anything that I could do to fill out this exercise as good as I could. So found lots of bugs, found lots of issues, ended up writing about a 16-page paper. I don't know if that's what they were going for, but I did end up writing a 16-page write-up and paper on all of the issues that I found and turned that in and got me to the next process. So, I asked them, is this what you're looking for? It looks great. I didn't quite get the vibe they wanted to read the whole thing. They might have, they might not have, I don't know at this point, but they were very thorough, so it's very likely that they did. With that, though, it got me to the next part of the interview phase. What I liked about their interviews was the first part was, it's a multi-part session where I'm coming in to interview mostly with the people that I'll be working with. So I go in for an in-person interview. Their strategy was individual one-on-one interviews. So I go in for the first one. I, again, interview with the manager. He's vetting me. I then interview with the team lead. And then I end up interviewing with a colleague. And that was what I guess would be round one of the in-person interviews, if you want to consider it round one. Based on the 16-page paper I wrote, I'm guessing it's more like round three of the interview process. But I interviewed with the manager, team lead, and a colleague. So a lot of vetting going on there. Then they walk me through the office, tell me a little bit about it, and invite me back for the second interview. The second interview was a manager of another department, somebody in another department that I would be working with. So a colleague, but not a direct colleague, not another QA engineer that would be sitting next to me. And, a third individual that was on the team, I think another team lead from another organization, another part of the role. So, you're getting people from not only the team you're working in, but in the second round of interviews, you're getting, maybe a manager of HR and a team lead from development, and then an individual contributor from another part of the organization, maybe marketing or something along those lines. So very, very thorough process. That was part 2 of the in-person interview. And then I got invited back for the last part of the interview. The last part of the interview was probably the most interesting and unique. Now, this was a 100+ person business, so large enough large enough to make you think that you wouldn't be interviewing with the CEO, but yet small enough that they could make the time. And so my interview process there was with the CEO, the CTO, and I think another executive level person. Maybe it was the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer. So the CEO comes in and he does a much more like personable type interview. I think I got the vibe that he was just wanting to talk and kind of get a feel for, my interaction, who I was. CTO came in, and this was another part of what impressed me about Spi is, this wasn't a CTO that got the position by knowing how to manage people in the technology space. He not only knew how to manage the people in the technology space, but he knew it through and through. In this case, if I remember correctly, the CTO was Caleb Sema at the time, and he was either the founder or one of the co-founders of the organization. So highly technical CTO started grilling me on all kinds of technology questions, which, was impressive for me because I've talked to a lot of CTOs that just didn't have that depth of knowledge, and felt like I was at the right place. And then went through the last interview process. So from there, I was hired at Spi Dynamics. Very, very thorough hiring process, and we'll talk a little bit more about the pros and cons of that. Went in for my first day and got a very quick taste of the culture. So my manager walks up and gives me a foam disc shooter, a little toy, a giant bouncy ball, and some other fun items, and then starts making the introductions and doing the onboarding process. So with that, you can see that, I wanted to share that just to give you an idea of the depth that some companies have when it comes to their interview process. What are they going through to ensure that they are getting the best people in? Now, the amazing thing about that interview process and that company was, I felt like every person in that organization, everyone that I worked with, was one of, if not the top person, maybe even in the industry, in their position. I felt like everybody I spoke with was an A player. Everybody went through that hiring process. Everybody went through that level of due diligence, and I worked with nothing but rock stars. And that was just an amazing experience. But as a company, that's really challenging. I mentioned in my first podcast that at Atcore Systems, my prior company that I grew and sold over about 9 years, that we struggled building and repeating some of those processes, because when you're in the throes of business, and like in the consulting space, when you land a new deal, you need new people now, right? That lengthy hiring process can be a real struggle and a real challenge. So I'm going to challenge you to think through your hiring process. What are you doing to put in the steps that are necessary to ensure that you're getting the right person on board? And with that, how does that play into the culture later? How does that play into the feeling for everybody else when everybody knows that they're sitting next to another rock star in the industry, or somebody that's an up and coming A player, or just generally somebody that's going to get that job done? So think through your hiring process. Don't rush through it. Make sure that you're bringing on the right people. And we look forward to sharing more about hiring process and how you can inject hiring and culture and A players into your business in the future.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Epic Company Culture Podcast with Josh Sweeney. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. For additional content and transcripts, visit epicculture.co. If you have questions or topics you would like us to address or expand on, tweet us at epicculture1 or email at podcast@epicculture.co.